Hi, this is Bob Wells here, and welcome to Undercurrent Stories. This is the show where we hear about people's interests and uncover some fascinating stories at the same time. I hope you enjoy today's show. For those of us of a certain age, and who can remember the year 1991, for me the memories are the beginning of the First Gulf War with Operation Desert Storm, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and the release and success of the film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. The theme song entitled Everything I Do For You was released by Bryan Adams. So popular was the song that it stayed at number one in the singles charts in the UK for 4 months. But one of the biggest memories of that year was a song that defiantly remained at number 2, refusing to budge for 6 weeks in the UK. That song was I'm Too Sexy by the band Right Said Fred. The song was so successful around the world that it went on its way to make number 1 in Australia, Austria, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand and the US, where the single topped the Billboard Hot 100. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Richard and Fred Fairbrass of Right Said Fred. Hello and welcome to the show, gents.
Hey, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm sure I left 1 or 2 accolades out there, but I think we get the
No,
picture.
no, that's fine. One is enough.
Yeah, we're not
accolade driven.
We're not very accolade driven.
No.
Well, thanks ever so much for coming onto the show through our mutual friend Tim Clare. It's great that a little shout out there for Tim.
Pleasure.
What I'd like to do, if that's okay, is we'll talk about the music in a minute, but would it be okay just to tell listeners a little bit about yourselves when you're sort of growing up? Before you got into the music,
Sure.
Where did you live? You've obviously got this very close bond as brothers. How did that develop? And then eventually, how did you become interested in music?
Right, shall I do it?
Yes, go on, off you.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Well, we were both born in London. We were raised outside in a little sort of a market town called East Grinstead, just sort of not that far from Gatwick. And we both got into the way we got into music was I started playing guitar when I was about 12. And I did that because I wanted to write songs. I'd seen a band at school who I didn't think were very good. They were doing cover versions, and I just thought, why can't these bands do their own songs? So I started learning guitar to write songs. Then, after a bit of sort of writing and stuff, Richard thought I had some half-decent ideas. So he started playing bass.
So I hitched my wagon to his.
Yes. So Richard bought a bass, and we started working together as a sort of as a duo, really. And then we went, long story short, we just went through a whole bunch of musicians and bands and gigs. And our first tour was 1978, and that was with a New York sort of punk electronica band called Suicide. And as part of that tour, we also supported Joy Division. And I think we did a bunch of other shows, all sorts of bands like The Adverts, all sorts of things. And then we were in and out of record deals, like a lot of bands, all the way through the 80s. We got signed in America to EMI, Capital EMI, when we were living in America in 86, 87. And then that deal fell through. And when that deal fell through, we were pretty battle-weary, to be honest with you, in and out of deals for over 10 years. And then we thought, screw this, we're sick of record companies, let's just put a little duo together.
Sick of record companies?
Let's put a little duo together. And so we did, we put Right Said Fred together in 88, started doing some shows, and real just pub stuff. We started getting interest from record labels, and they didn't really interest us. We didn't want to do that. And then actually, exactly at that same time, in fact, a little bit before, I'd been really getting into a lot of house music. I've been going to illegal raves and legal raves like Shoom and Dirtbox and really getting into that dance stuff. And I said to Richard, why can't we, let's do something different. And I also, what crossed my mind is a lot of these records didn't have guitars in them. It was all synth-driven and groove-driven.
Back in the day, it was.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be really nice to put some guitars on a track like that. So anyway, through a local rehearsal room, we hooked up with a guitar player and songwriter called Rob Manzoni. And the deal was, we said, we're not interested in anything you've got to play to us, and we're not interested in you hearing anything that we've got to play to you.
Yeah.
Let's just sit down and write brand new, no old ideas, brand new. So that's where I'm Too Sexy came from. I'm Too Sexy came from taking a bass pattern that Richard had.
Which is just an E major scale.
Yeah, da, 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 da. It's just E major scale. So we hooked up with a computer programmer. We'd never done that before either. And we had this groove running. And then out of nowhere, Richard just started singing, I'm too sexy for my shirt, which was singing the bass melody, the bass line. And Richard and Rob thought it was hysterical and fantastic. And for a minute, I was a bit unsure. I thought, well, what are we going to do with that idea, you know? And then after a while, I think I had a girlfriend at the time who was a model. And she had actually, no word of a lie, she had actually said to me when I met her, I'm a model, do you know what I mean? She actually said that. So I
stuck it in the song.
So I thought, I said, this is quite cool, this idea. We can write this about all this. And we just come back from New York, which was very hedonistic, very party driven.
So it was also the time of the supermodel.
The whole supermodel
you remember
thing.
the whole supermodel expression.
It was huge. And we thought, this song could be really cool, taking the piss out of, narcissists and the sort of people that dance in front of the mirror and all that sort of thing. So the chorus was, I'm a model, you know what I mean? So we took Rob's guitar riff, put a lyric to that, took Richard's bass riff, then I put more lyrics to that. And then we basically put it out through a promotions company. No, the record companies wouldn't touch it. Island Records were particularly dismissive and said this will never be a hit. And then we had it from loads of other record companies, every record company we sent it to. And we didn't believe them because we'd been signed to them before and they'd been rubbish. So we said, let's just get this on the radio. And God bless him, or them, actually, was Gary Crowley and Simon Bates. Both had the spine and the support and the power to play it. So once Simon Bates had played it on his breakfast show, which I think I'm right in saying was the biggest breakfast show. His breakfast show was the biggest show in Europe, radio show in Europe at the time, I think so. And he played it, and the phones just went mental. So he played it off the acetate. If those who don't know what an acetate is, it's like a vinyl record.
The rough,
and it's the demo. It's the experimental version. It's to see how it sounds on vinyl. It's like a copy, if you like a sample.
Back in those days, you couldn't do that now.
No.
There's no way you could do that. Walk into Radio 1 or Radio 2, anywhere, even regional, with an acetate and say, "Will you play this?" You've got to go through programmers. That back in the day, it was very loose, really, by comparison.
Yeah, it's very corporate now.
And it is so corporate now.
So a couple of stories short, what happened was the record, that one play from Simon Bates, they played it again immediately because the phones went mad. Then the speed of the record was just extraordinary. I mean, by the time we got back to the gym, we were both personal trainers. By the time we got back to the gym, the frigging mainstream media were there. It was extraordinary. Wow. So the whole thing started going mad, and then we started doing a bunch of shows, and this record went up the charts, and people were quite reluctant to do licensing deals on it. But the minute they saw it go top 10 in the UK, and then it went top 40 in America on import, which is pretty rare. And so Charisma signed it to America. Then it went number one. And the sort of numbers records like that were doing then was, we were selling 100,000 CDs a day, just in one country, in America, So they were extraordinary times. And I think probably I think Britpop was probably one of the last movements to have access to those sort of sales, though that sort of before it went totally digital. I think come the early in Europe we were still selling big numbers up until about 2010 because Germany was very slow to go digital. It was still physical. But UK went digital pretty quickly, really.
Yeah. It was interesting you were saying about how you wanted to sort of incorporate the guitar into dance music.
Yes. Yes.
At the time, I was, and still am to a certain extent, quite into guitar music. I was very into Hendrix. Thin Lizzy and T-Rex and all that.
Yep.
But it's only recently I realised that guitar riff in Sexy is the sort of tune to one of the Hendrix songs. Third Stone from the Sun.
Third Stone from the Sun. Yeah. People think it's.
We thought we came up with it.
Yeah. What happened was that Rich and I knew Hendrix, but we didn't own albums. We weren't particularly fans. But Rob was a massive fan.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. And when he played us that riff, I said, "Well, that sounds like Coronation Street." Da, 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 da. And he said, "No, it's Hendrix." I said, "What song is that on?" And
I think Hendrix nicked it from Coronation
Street. Yeah, it sounds like Coronation Street.
When he was in the UK.
When he was in the UK.
It sounds like Coronation Street. Yeah. And so anyway, fortunately, the Hendrix estate were incredibly supportive and generous. And they said to us, because of your demographic, it'd be great to get. We obviously it has to be credited, and we'd like you to give some money to our charity of choice, which we did, and they were absolutely fantastic, and there wasn't any sort of legal stuff with them in the early days, and that melody. I mean, the Hendrix thing got commented on quite a lot in the press, and also the idea was to have some guitars. So there's there's a little guitar riff in that. There's the riff, and we wanted to have guitars that weren't playing typical disco, which is great, and I love all that chic
the
stuff.
Nile Rodgers sort of stuff.
Yeah, brilliant guitar player, but we didn't want to do that sort of disco. We wanted to stick in a more house groove. So we wanted to stay away from those sort of things, and I think
then we did Dippy Dippy,
and yeah, exactly.
Go figure.
Yeah, we really messed things up.
We really messed things up.
So when we did Don't Torture's Kiss, the acoustic guitar riff, we wanted to still keep away from the sort of typical disco stuff. So that's why we did that riff. And then, as Richard says, we did Dippy Dippy. And actually, the record company wouldn't have it on the album initially. They said, "You're not putting this."
They went on holiday, in fact.
Yeah, they said, "You're not putting this on the album." Yeah, so we had a big fight to get this on the album, and then it went number one. And of course, they suddenly forgot about how they didn't want it and claimed it was their idea. Funny that. That's kind of,
sorry.
So go on.
One question I've got is this thing about success. I've had one or two people on the show who have. Us mere mortals, we look at people like you as pop stars, and perhaps one time I wanted to be one, all the rest of it, but obviously not hungry enough. One question I've got is: did you always believe in yourselves that one day, when you were younger and you were in the bands in New York, did you always believe that you would be professional musicians and that was what your calling was? And was it a struggle all the time, or did you almost sort of manifest it and say, we're cool doing what we're doing, it'll happen? How did that work? How did that dynamic work? I'm curious on that.
Yeah, well, I think in a way you don't think about it. I think you think about it when you really can't climb up the stairs to get onto the stage. Then you start thinking about whether you've maybe pushed it too far. But I can remember just before Sexy broke, I went for a walk with Dad, who's now passed away sadly, and he was sort of fishing around, sort of saying, "So, how's this music thing going?" And how's it, because I was 33, 34 then. He was probably thinking, my God, it's way too late. So I think we part of it is just stubbornness. I think
it is stubbornness.
It is just the people who say no are very often people you don't know. They're always people you don't know. People you very, very likely don't respect, and haven't got the nerve to actually do what most bands do, which is get up on stage and actually ply their craft. So you get very stubborn about it, and you start thinking, well, actually, when they say at school, don't smoke behind the sheds, and everybody smokes behind the sheds. It's that. Yeah. It's the more they say no, the more you push forward. Yeah, that's all it is. I
mean, also because I think through the 80s, Richard had done some stuff with David Bowie, and I'd done a tour with playing guitar with Bob Dylan, and so we kind of felt, well, hang about, if we're good enough to do this work, and we've been signed to some good independent labels. We've been signed to EMI, Capital EMI, and then picked up by some big management. Well, if we're good enough, if they think we're good enough, but we're not getting that break. So we were quite stubborn about it, and we are quite self-critical. So we will sit down and go, well, what's wrong? Why isn't that song right? Yeah. And we'll look at it and we go, what did we get wrong? And we've always been like that. But we are. I wouldn't say it's not arrogance; it's stubbornness. I just don't believe other people. I just don't believe them. I don't believe them when someone says that is when someone gives me an absolute like that won't work. I just think, well, how do you know that?
Yeah, how do you know that?
Who says? Yeah, exactly. If they said I don't think it'll work, that's fine. That's their opinion. But if they come out with a statement of fact, that is not a hit.
So it makes you more determined to prove them.
I just think, do you know what do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And I look at the particular record companies. I mean, we don't have a good relationship with nearly any record company we've ever worked with, and that's partly, I think, because we took so long to break, and we were playing all through those mid to late 70s. The live gigging scene in England was very, very, as great as it was also quite hostile. it wasn't hard to get into a fight. It wasn't uncommon to see fights. There was a general, punk thing was quite aggressive. Then it went into new wave. Got a little bit calmed down a little bit in the 80s. But generally speaking, particularly London and gigs like the Windsor Castle and the Kensington, was it? That was in around Conference Court, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And places like the Nashville, we got pushed around and people tried to nick our gear, and so you become quite savvy and you become quite belligerent.
Yeah, because those gigs were. I mean, it's plus and minus. There were gigs everywhere back in the day. I mean, London, kids now have no idea how barren London is in terms of music compared to what it was in the 70s and 80s and early 90s. Every pub was a gig.
Yeah.
The Nashville, which is what we played, which was a really famous country gig at the time, is now called the Three Kings, and it's just a pub with screens and a sports bar. Mm-hmm. And it's London has lost its mojo completely in that respect. But you do toughen up. You just have to. And when Fred was talking earlier about us doing a support tour with Suicide, that was, I'd never, ever, ever heard a band that loud.
No.
Never. I mean, they were, and we came back off stage and somebody had weed all over our clothes. So you get used to stuff. You just have to.
You just get battle hardened to it, I guess.
Yeah, it's not like going on some
Richard, what was it?
Show,
Richard, just a quick question about David Bowie. What was it like working with David? How long did you work with him for? What was he like?
He was quite shy, I thought. Most of the stuff that if you wanted to talk to him, you had to go through a lady called Coco Schwab, who I think was working with him at the time.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about earlier about what made you keep going, one thing that working with him made me feel was that he was just a bloke. He's just a bloke.
Yeah.
As good as he is,
he's a bloke. He stands naked when
can't fly.
The Bob Dylan thing. Like every president has to stand naked sometimes.
Yes.
So there is that thing that you lose your awe.
The mystique goes.
The mystique goes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good thing. Mm-hmm. I've only ever had that awe about one person. That was Frank Sinatra. And I guess if I'd met him face to face or worked with him in some way, I would have lost that as well.
Yeah.
It's once you meet these people and you see what they're like, and they're your height, and they dress, they've got sneakers on, all that kind of stuff. They're just people.
They're
just people.
Yeah.
So that was quite and Mick Jagger was the same when we worked with him. It was exactly the same. He was completely different to David Bowie.
Yeah. Very outgoing,
much more belligerent, and much more physical than David Bowie. But same thing. He's a bloke.
Yeah.
A lot of these people will try and have you believe that they're not blokes or people, that they are somehow from the stars, they're somehow special, and all this stuff that you, particularly now with the Illuminati stuff that goes on and the special hand signals and all that. There's this inclination to think that they're actually special. They're actually just people. That's all they are.
Yeah.
They might be very good at what they do, but they're just people.
So I guess when you made it, and you mentioned you were in your early 30s, having that experience enabled you to sort of deal with the...
Yes.
I think what happened, particularly in America, we definitely got groomed in America because the band was so famous. And so we found ourselves in the company of some very famous people.
Yeah.
And going, invited to different parties and events and all this sort of stuff. And I think because of the way, if we'd been 10 years younger, we would have bought into it.
Yeah.
But we just thought, this is all a bit crap.
I just wanted to get home.
Yeah, we thought,
ridiculous.
we just thought it was all a bit
sit on the sofa.
And
Yeah.
I mean, initially it's fun. You walk into a restaurant in LA and everyone knows who you are and all this sort of stuff or whatever. And the shows were great and all that sort of thing. But we got approached by quite some big Hollywood names and we just didn't think, it didn't click for us. And so, and then when we fell out with the independent label we were with, we were offered some crazy money by the major labels. And we just thought, do you know what? I don't want to do that. So we set up our own label, for good or bad. It probably wasn't the best idea financially, but we did. And we've actually always been independent. We have worked with major labels, but through a third party. We've never signed directly to a major label. We've never signed an artist deal. And we were approached by a major label in 2018. They wanted to sign us. and we had a couple of meetings. And when we actually said we don't want the deal, our manager at the time phoned up to check if he had heard me right. He said, "What do you mean? You don't want a record deal with this with major label?" We said, "No, we got off, and we're not interested. We'd rather stay where we are." And I think people are
that enabled us to speak out when this whole COVID nonsense happened.
Yeah,
that enabled us to speak our minds, because if we'd been signed to a major management or a major label, I'm sure we would have had phone calls saying, "Can you soften the, shut up," or whatever.
Yeah.
And as Fred says, it's sometimes you just have to do what your gut tells you. It might not be necessarily the best financial decision or whatever, but you just have to do what you feel is right.
And do you think as brothers, with that bond, that sort of helped your sort of determination, stoicism, that you wanted to be a truly independent band? Do you think?
Yes, I mean, my wife, we've been together since 2002 on and off, sort of thing. And, we first met, got together then, really, and then married in 2010. But my wife is quite a stubborn person as well, and gets, which makes her mind about something, she tends to stick to it. And so the family, and my daughter's quite ballsy. So our family are quite, no, I'm doing it this way. If you believe you want to do it that way, you do it. We didn't have many voices saying, really, you sure that's a good idea?
What I think is interesting, we did the ancestry thing.
Oh yeah.
And our bloodline goes back to Southern Ireland.
Yeah,
and the rebel country. So I'm wondering whether that rebel stuff,
it's in the DNA.
Through. I don't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, we never knew that. Mum and Dad, we was always Italian and Jewish and those sort of mixes.
It's actually Irish,
but it's almost a quarter Irish. Yeah,
that's interesting.
So that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
But I think it's each person's choice. But we've seen it the last 4 years. Some artists just went with the narrative, and you can tell that they're doing what they've been told to do, and other artists didn't. I think you just have to live with yourself, whatever you think is right for you. I think there's been a little bit too many sort of finger pointing going on, and probably we've been guilty of doing that as well. But it's But I think I think our position really has always been, if fame and fortune is your goal, you wouldn't do what we've done.
No.
You wouldn't do an independent route, because you will not get the support at radio if you're an independent artist. And if you look at all we saw a voting form for the Brits, there are no independent artists on there. No. And then someone said to me, "You're wrong about that. What about Ray?" And I said, "Well, Ray is signed to an independent label. That independent label is owned by Sony.
Yeah.
So if that's not independent, if you're independent, you are independent funding. Yeah. You can have distribution by the companies, of course, all that. But if you're actually owned by a bigger company, then of course that doesn't work. Yeah. So we are truly independent, and that's not saying we always will be. If we found a label that really liked us, maybe we'd sign.
The issue is just finding people, whether it's management or a label, or it doesn't matter who it is, who you chime with.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, we've recently done a record with a guy called Sam Williams, who did Supergrass stuff and Plan B and stuff like that, and we hit it off with Sam straight away.
Yeah,
and that for us is quite rare.
Yeah.
We don't find people in the business very empathetic to us as people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a major issue. We would work with anybody if we feel that they understand what we're about and what we want to try and do. But we haven't been lucky in that respect.
Yeah, and it is. I'm just saying, it is very much, even more so now, driven by sponsors, big labels, big management. Yeah. And if you're not in that bubble, you have to be very creative and come up with other ways of making money.
When we started, we had to make dozens of cassettes for all the labels, because there were Stiff Records, there are hundreds of them,
Yeah.
And now you could get away with making about half a dozen.
Not even.
Yeah.
In fact, they don't listen to them. I mean, that's all gone.
That's all gone. It's all
numbers.
Numbers.
It's all driven by what they
don't care about music. What are your numbers?
Yeah, it's all metadata, and they don't really care.
I've been listening to, so I absorbed myself over the last weekend in your stuff, and I've been enjoying Exactly.
Great! Thank you.
Yeah, and some really interesting songs on there. And there was one song that you did on. You brought out a hits album last year, which sort of re-engineered some of their
Yes.
songs, didn't it? But there was one track
Yes.
on there, and forgive me, I've lost the name of the song. But it was one particular song that I thought was really good. And songs like Godsend and Spiritual War, which most people, having heard Deeply Dippy and the other songs, wouldn't sort of put that in a category. But I mean, these are sort of like, these have got serious messages, haven't they? What made you want to touch on those sorts of themes?
Well, I think with Godsend and Spiritual War, I think the whole country, well, the whole Western world was going through a period, and still is in a way, where I think we, without getting too West Coast about it, we are forgetting what the human spirit is. And if you listen to people like Yuval Harari and the WF, then they're not about love or art or the human spirit or anything about that. They're all about money and they're all about technology. That's all they're about. So we were trying to write songs, particularly, Spiritual War, which were about, that's what this is. It's not just about left or right or anything else. It's about whether you're a humanist or an individual. You see yourself as a sovereign individual. So that's why we did it, I think. And I'm split with this because I really, really like meaningless pop songs. I love Mark Bolan for me, when he's sort of completely meaningless lyrics, fantastic stuff. I love it. But I also really like, a hard hitting. We played that song we were playing yesterday.
Whitey Ford,
yeah. So I'm split. I like both, but I think I wouldn't want to go out on stage and play a whole set of messagey type songs.
On stage, we like to keep it really buoyant.
Yeah.
But ever since the first album, on the first album, there's Do You Feel?
Swan.
There's Swan. Then we wrote I'm a Celebrity, which is taking the piss out of celebrity songs.
The lyrics in that are great.
And then we did We're All Criminals, which is the original version of Criminals is about surveillance Britain. And then we kind of rejigged it a little bit to get into a more contemporary thing with Lockdown. But it's still basically an anti-Big Brother, really.
Have you ever considered doing anything, or have you been approached to do Eurovision?
Yes.
Twice or three times.
I think 2 or 3 times we've been asked. We've been asked to appear once, but I think we've been asked to write 2 or 3 times. And personally, I just wouldn't bother. No. I think it's probably, I don't know if it's fixed, but it's certainly, maybe let's say,
you have
controlled.
You have to. You absolutely have to win.
Yeah, and it's a sort of. We did. We were talking to. We got involved for a little bit, and it wasn't for us. I mean, we aren't very good at. We're not very good at collaborating. We do write with other people, but a lot of the time we find them a little bit precious, and they're more concerned with themselves than the song. Right. And when we write, our position is: how do we make this song as attractive and as catchy as possible? That's just how we think. That's just how we think. And when we were writing with someone just last year, and I don't think he understood.
Who do you think of?
I would say. Okay. I don't think he understood hooks. He's in a very guitar-based genre, and he was more involved in how he looked, his image, than look what we're trying to do. Because our thing was, you're very good at what you do, but you need a crossover track. You need a track that's going to take you out of this genre, but is faithful to the genre. Yeah. Loads of Joe Bonamassa has done it. Loads of people have done it, and it can be very effective. And that was what our position was, and he didn't get it at all. And so we tend to go cold on ideas quite a lot if we don't, the ego thing, when that gets in the way, and we tend to back off. On that, sadly, we also have missed some great writing opportunities. We were asked to write for the Spice Girls, and we sort of thought, no, we don't want to do that.
They won't get anywhere.
So no, yeah. So we just weren't in the mood. We probably should have done, but we just weren't in the mood.
I was going back to the tracks you mentioned. I think one of the reasons that these tracks tend to, certain radio is not interested in playing anything that we do at the moment unless it's old. And I think part of the reason, my feeling is that we broke as a kind of fluffy family band, if you know what I mean, like a kind of, a red top kind of band. And then it's like discovering your favourite uncle is a little bit of a perv.
Not a perv.
Well, not a perv, but a bit dodgy. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so it changes your perception of that person. And I think with us, it was we started doing songs that were not fluffy. They were a little bit more reflective, a little bit more serious, I suppose. And I think we stepped out of our lane. I think that's all it was. I think we just stepped out of our lane.
But the fans love it, don't they?
Yes, but we don't have any problem with fans. No, we don't. No. And Germany particularly. I mean, Germany,
that's where you're really big, isn't it?
Yeah, very good market for that whole GSA thing.
South Africa and Canada, we did a tour of Canada just before this COVID thing happened. And but I think I generally feel that punters are much more receptive to new ideas, much more receptive than labels and management think they are.
I think radio has become a huge problem. And ever since the Telecommunications Act of 1996, I think it was, where basically now, official charts are partly, the playlisting is controlled by the major labels, which means they control the charts. So in a way, you could argue independent charts are much more reflective of because a lot of them are based on people ringing in. The people who are listening, they ring in and they put their vote in. So you could argue the legacy charts, the heritage chart, are much more genuine than some of the official charts because they're much more manipulated.
I think we irritate people just by being alive.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. I think that
just by still being around,
You brought a book out last year, Still Too Sexy.
Yes.
Tell us, if you don't mind, about the writing process, because I reckon that must go right back to your childhood. What was that like?
Yeah, in all fairness, we worked with a ghostwriter called Joel McIver, who was very, very good. And we went away with him for about 5 days. He did this kind of imagery you do on this huge piece of paper.
From day one,
And you write dates in. You write significant dates in, and then you start adding everything up. And you see your life on a big sheet of paper. It's extraordinary. Wow. And Joel was great. And it was his idea to put it in the form of a conversation. And the review for the book was interesting with the book. The reviews for the book were great. Even, was it The Guardian or Independent? Book of the Week or something. It was extraordinary. And then our publisher cancelled us. So then what happened was, to actually make the thing work, it was extraordinary. So they were part of a literary festival. They fund this literary festival. So they cancelled us off that. And then this snowball thing happened. So then everybody cancelled us. Sister Ray cancelled us. Waterstones, Rough Trade, HMV, it all just like went.
Simply because you spoke out about COVID and the control.
Well, actually, no,
it wasn't.
It wasn't. The bizarre thing was, so
the Manchester thing, the literary festival in Manchester, was because we were deemed to be transphobic.
They called us transphobic.
I don't know. I mean, I've actually been with a trans guy, actually, so I don't know how phobic that I need to be. It was just nonsense. And Stuart, my partner for 28 years, worked in Madame Jojo's and made a living out of being a cross-dresser. So, it was a bizarre thing. I don't know.
Yeah, it was at that time. It's all that fear. One person makes a complaint and the whole thing falls apart. And sort of the far left were having a go at us, and there's all that. It just got a bit stupid. But it was our publisher who actually kind of cancelled this. It's strange. It was the most bizarre sort of thing. So what we did, we bought our own stock, went out on the road and sold it there, and we sell it online, and it sells okay. It's done all right. I mean, not massive because we've had no support from the major retailers, but it did okay. It's made.
And are you finding now the cancelling thing has reached its peak, and you're sort of it's all being forgotten?
I think so.
Yeah. Pretty much. I mean, we did a bunch of interviews last year on the back of the singles album. All BBC regional radio were fantastic.
Yeah.
All commercial regional radio was fantastic.
Never had a problem regional.
Never had a problem. Never. Some of the morning TVs probably will never have us. That's fine. But overall, it's sort of died away. It's catching up a bit. We've been booked in for some festivals. We've already been booked into some really good events for next year, particularly one in Austria, which is, I think, the biggest outdoor festival in Europe.
That's 2025, is it?
Yes, yeah. So
if we're still alive.
Yeah, if we're still So, but I mean, it is picking up compared to where we were 2 years ago. It's much better.
Yeah.
We don't really get it.
What about gigs and tours this year? Have you got any gigs in the UK?
We don't even have an agent in the UK.
No, we can't get an agent.
We can't even get an agent.
We can't get an agent, which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So we've got we have a very good agent in Germany and a very good agent in Holland. and other requests come through the website. But
sorry to interrupt. What's that festival and the Brit Festival thing?
Oh, there's a thing called.
It's actually quite funny.
There's a thing called the Brit Festival. I think it's called the Brit Festival. And it just popped up on my Facebook, and I thought, well, what's that? And you can't believe how many bands are playing this festival. You can hardly see the print for the amount of bands playing. So I started to look at that, and then I think it's every band in the UK apart from us. I mean, I think it is literally every band.
You have to laugh.
Yeah, and we actually were asked to play. We had a request coming today, but it's from people who had been quite aggressive, had been quite hostile to us before about us speaking out, and they cancelled previous shows. So we've actually refused to do their shows because, partly now we don't trust them.
Yeah.
And I just think it's best just to move on and get away from that. And we said what we had to say, and we're just trying to do music and earn a living now.
So the gigs you've got coming up in Europe, are they tours? Are you going on a full tour, or are they festivals?
No.
No, festivals.
They're standalone festivals. Yeah. The ones in the UK, we're doing Jam for Freedom Festival, I think it's August 10th, and we're doing Sunshine Festival on August the 25th.
Wow.
And then we've got some other work abroad. And then then we go out again in January. It's in South Africa. And I think it is picking up slowly. I just think we put a few people's noses out of joint. But I would just like to say that we were actually cancelled in the UK back in '95.
Before this.
This. Yes, we were. There's a sort of a list of bands that Radio 1 will have vowed never to play or playlist again, and some other radio stations. Apparently we were on that. And also we were told in 1992, when we had a number one album here, number one single here and America, Michael Evers at Glastonbury said, I will never have them on my festival. Yeah, back in 92.
It's bizarre, isn't
so I think it is bizarre. I think the cancellation thing I think you either fit. Sometimes you fit and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And we tend to have a much happier experience in Europe generally than we do in the UK. That's just how it is, and we're not the only band.
And what about your next album? How's that going? Are you recording one at the moment, or you got plans?
No, we aren't. What we're doing, we've just done this single with Sam Williams, like Richard said.
Yeah.
We're talking to some sort of like media partners, as they now refer them to themselves. And if on the back of that there was some traction, we might look at a fresh album next year. But it would need to be based. I think now.
I'd love to do an album with Sam.
Yeah, with the way the industry is, sadly, unless you've got loads of money, you can't just go off piste and just think, let's give it a go. I think you need reason.
We have to finance everything.
Yeah, so I think you need to give yourselves a reason, and it needs to be a financial and economic, some sense behind it.
And you guys with music itself, taking the industry out of the way, are you still writing songs between you?
Yes.
You are?
Yeah.
We write a lot. In fact, this week we were in the studio writing for a new children's book. Which we've been commissioned for this song, so we're doing that this week. And I think we write a lot, and I think through Sam and there's some other interested parties, us doing some co-writing. So writing is probably one of our most favourite pastimes, apart from playing live.
I think also it's hard to explain. I mean, a lot of people out there in the last 3 or 4 years have had a really rough time. Lots and lots of artists have had a really rough time.
And other people,
obviously, everybody. And the only thing that kept us afloat was our writing stream.
Yes.
Because we write songs, we had money coming in from that. But if we were just performers who only got paid when we performed, as a lot of session players do, a lot of backing singers, whatever, it would have been extremely tough because gigs just disappeared.
And what about the actual playing the instruments? Richard, obviously yourself on the bass and you on guitar. Fred, do you still pick them up independently and just have a play around and a practice for the enjoyment of the music?
Actually, in terms of practice, we're both quite disciplined. Richard's now teaching himself to read music. I do.
Late in the bloody day.
I do my scales and my finger exercises and all that sort of stuff, and pretty regularly. Actually, I'm quite. I enjoy
Noodling.
Yeah, noodling. Yeah, I do. So we do play. Then obviously you have days where you don't. Like I did. I think last time I played was Friday. So I'll pick it up again today or tomorrow.
Also, in terms of writing, it's good to have a target. Yeah. We tend not to write unless we know why we're writing.
Yes,
if you know what I mean. So we don't just sit down and in a vacuum and curate a song. If we know we have a single to do, or we have like with this thing on Thursday for this children's book, we have that commission. We know we're going to be doing it. And that's what drives us to write.
Yeah.
We don't just. If I was a painter, I wouldn't have an attic full of paintings. I would just paint to commission. And I think that's how we work. I think a lot of writers just write, regardless. But we tend not to.
So you'll have that sort of gestating in your head, will you, until Thursday? Some ideas to be going around.
We've got we've got a riff that we like, and we know what the subject matter roughly has to be.
Do
you both do you both contribute to the lyrics?
Fred does most.
I do most of it, but it is collaborative. But I run ideas past Richard, and I tend to do the bulk of lyrics. But
do you do any lead vocals, Fred? Do you do any lead vocals at all?
No, I don't do lead. I do some very basic backing vocals. I don't really enjoy it, so I do the minimum of backing vocals on stage and in the studio. I'm Richard's, because Richard's a bass baritone. His voice really suits female vocals.
Oh, right.
It's a very good dynamic that their pitch against Richard's bass baritone.
Very bass,
I can sing the octave to his lead vocal, and I do on certain choruses, but it's not something I particularly enjoy, so don't bother.
When we did promotion in America, when Sexy first broke, we did all this. We went to all the radio stations, and the first thing they asked us to do is, "Can you do the opening line of I'm Too Sexy?" Because they thought it was all faked. They thought that it was gone through a machine, so that bottom E was just a trick. They didn't believe we could actually do it. Yeah, so that was, and I remember thinking at the time, why are they asking me to do this?
It's quite low, isn't it?
Yeah, and then you realise, exactly.
Now, guys, I'm conscious of your time.
Great.
I'll get moving now. So, if we've got any listeners out there who really like their music and they want to be in the music industry, with the experience that you've had and the changes that you've seen over the last sort of 30 years, what advice would you give?
God.
Always own your own material.
Try and hang on to
your stuff.
To your rights, publishing and master rights. I think probably, as much as you want to go out and do some shows, probably try and add content online.
Yeah.
And the thing to do is to actually just get to the job, get stuck into what you enjoy doing. Because if all else fails, at least you're still left with having some enjoyment.
Exactly.
And what happens with some artists, in our experience, is they follow what they think is a hit, or what they think other people think is a hit. And if it all goes wrong, they're left with nothing. They don't even have a song they like.
No.
So I would think try and stick to always stuff that you enjoy doing.
One of the biggest mistakes we made over the years have been to the expression "bite the bullet." That's what we were told. So you'd say, do this crappy gig, because if you do this crappy gig, you get a really good gig next month. No.
Doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen. What you do the crappy gig and the good gig disappears. So always, always, always look at it case by case by case, and don't promises mean nothing in this business. They really don't. Billy Joel once said, asked that question that you just asked, and he said, get a gun and a lawyer. That's what he said. So
wise words.
Some great advice there. Yeah. Okay. So you've done a great job over the last 30 years with what you've been doing and everything, and I think you're an inspiration to what I would call truly indie, not a record company producing. Saying that this band is an indie band, truly independent. Have you got any more ambitions for your music?
I'd like to work with a couple of DJs. We enjoy. I really like. I think people like Robin Schultz are really interesting DJs out there. And he's very guitar sort of friendly. Yes. But other than that, I'd just like to do some more shows, do some more writing.
Working with players. I personally really enjoy working with players.
Yeah, I mean, obviously because of touring now and also so many festivals being pulled. I mean, I won't mention the festival, but there's a very, very famous UK festival that is still saying it's happening this year. And we spoke to one of the accountants last week, and they said, no, it's not happening. So I think I think just trying to get out there and enjoy what you can while it's there is our motto at the moment.
Exactly.
Try and
Where can people find out more about Right Said Fred?
RightSaidFred.com, at the Freds on Twitter, or X, I should say. Right Said Fred Official on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram.
Excellent stuff. Well, it's been really great talking to you. Learned an awful lot
Thank
more,
you.
and I can't wait to see you. Hopefully, one of the
Thanks,
UK festivals. So, my guests today have been Richard and Fred Fairbrass from Right Said Fred. You can find out more about the band, the website, and the link can be found on the episode show notes. Thanks for coming on the show, guys.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.